Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to our speakers and their respective actually. Today we will be discussing about how to write a publishable paper and avoid rejection. That will be presented by our visiting professor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Kabir Hassan, is our speaker for today's webinar. So without further ado, I would like to turn this space to our visiting professor. Please, Director.
One, two, three, four, five, six. Very easy. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you again. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum to everyone who are in attendance and on the web, on the Zoom. So the title of my presentation this afternoon is how to write a publishable paper and avoid rejection. So, I'm sure you have, this is not the first presentation that you have attended to on this topic. And this is not the first one that I have made myself. There is no magic bullet. How to write a publishable paper and get it accepted very easily. So this is an experience, a journey we go through. So there are a few things we always should keep in mind in the publication world. So this is me. I have been doing research for the last 30 plus years. And fortunately, I also edit the journal. I'm the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Islamic Administration, Finance and Management. So this is the only Islamic finance journal which is indexed in Scopus Q1 and Web of Science Q2. So I started the journal about 2008-9. It's almost what? For 14, 15 years ago. So Alhamdulillah, it has reached to this level. So this is a brief outline of our presentation. So let me start with the first, that how to achieve the research quality. Like I said it 2 days ago, 50 years ago, you have to be all in one in order to write a dissertation, to write a paper. Now, in this present world, not everyone has possessed all the qualities to write a good publishable paper. So you need to work in a research cluster framework. You have to have a team. You have to have a trusted co-researcher. You heard about Eugene Fama, right? He got Nobel Prize, who is famous for efficient market hypothesis in finance. He has, you'll see most of his papers are written with one person, which is Kenneth French. And Kenneth French happens to be one of his PhD students. So they trust, and they have built over the years, they have written many papers together. And I would really advise you for the young researchers and scholars to have this cluster or 2 or 3 people that you trust, you have different skill set that you can combine together. Maybe Dr. Ahmed is good in idea generation. Maybe Dr. Nizam is good in econometrics, data management. Maybe Dr. Arlina is good in writing. So you combine all these resources together to write a publishable paper. And that is also you achieve is called the cooperation economies of scope, not scale. Scope means you are combining many people together under the same umbrella. So you have to have a research problem lead to research opportunities. It is easy for me to say, in order to generate research problem, you have to continuously be thinking. So a true academician is not a normal person. What by that I mean that you live in a world of metrics, the world of unknowns like, Rumi, they roam around this world. And in this world that you have to have some companion around with you. Second one, initiate research stream. Motivate team can achieve identified research potential. So you have to people of homogeneous, not homogeneous in the sense, I mean, of course you have to have people who thinks in a different direction, but your convergence has to be there, that you're meeting minds, that you trust each other, you believe in each other's quality. Now, clarity in expression, a clear academic argument serves the basis for a teamwork, and you have to have a goal why you are there. Of course, the main goal is to do a purposeful research that will be helpful for the society. I don't believe in the doing research for the sake of research or doing research for the sake of publication. But I'm also guilty of doing this because I have to do this, certain percentage of research will be like this because to maintain KPI. But your research goal should be driven for the passion for it. Then teamwork within the scholar networks, academic network broadens research opportunities, not only your own cluster locally, you can also build cluster globally as well. I write papers on many scholars from different parts of the world, some by invitation, some I invite because I know certain person has certain quality or data set that I can have access to. And platform to considerate knowledge provides considerate view of emerging knowledge. Now, the 5 key conditions supporting research stream. 1, the role of theory and theorizing. Getting the research accepted. So the first thing, the role of theory and theorizing. Innovative thinking about theory and theorizing may face opposition to the innovative research that challenges academic convention. Getting research accepted, getting research recognized, ensure others of the academic community recognize and understand the research stream. We are all human, even though let's say you don't care about what other people think about research, but in this world, because of the citation game, people really need to know who you are, what you do, so they can read your paper, they can cite it. Number 4, tenacity and resilience. Tenacity and resilience toward acceptance, recognition among fellow academics. You have to be perseverant. You cannot give up. With 10% acceptance rate in many good journals, that means at any point in time, you have 10 papers ready in the pipeline. And if you're lucky, you get 1 paper accepted. And if you have pressure for publication from your dean or chair, you have to do that. And 10 papers, producing and having into the pipeline is not easy stuff. That really consumes most of your time. Sometimes you have to have an understanding spouse because, when you are in the writing phase or research phase, you forget about everything. Forget me not purposefully, you have to, otherwise you can't really generate that research. Number 5, sustaining leadership innovation, ensure a plan for sustained research leadership and innovation. So what happens, this is what we call life cycle of research production. Now I'm at the stage of my life, I have people work with me under my leadership guidance. So it's not like when I started my own research, made my hands dirty. Now those who work under me make their hands dirty. So I provide the leadership so that ultimately I get this paper written, submitted and accepted. Now, what is the main aim? As I say, to generate new knowledge. And that should be a guiding principle for all of us, but not that we always follow it or can follow it because of publication pressure. So you create new knowledge and theory, and this needs to be extended, not just verified. Avoid replication type studies. Leading journals do not go out for review. Replicating a research in Malaysia does not create originality. So you said that something was done in the United States and you have the Malaysian data, you replicate this. It's a research, I'm not saying this, but from the publication standpoint, for a good journal publication, it really, the journal editors nowadays look at multi-country study, not just one. They want to see what is true in America, what is true in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, many countries. Make significant contribution to the field. I say this, but significant contribution is not that easy. You may spend your entire life, you may be a good body of research, but you probably has not contributed to literature enough. So I would say that in any profession, my profession, maybe 1% whose paper becomes, time in memory immortal, that people really read it. Like Fisher equation we talk about, he wrote this is 1901, it still is the best dissertation written. And if you see, what is that Fisher equation? Nominal interest rate equals real interest rate plus inflation premium. So that is the Fisher, and we still recite this, and it becomes also a guiding principle for many economic theory or policy making. Identify substantive research problem of academic interest that has potential to develop further research opportunities in the future. It's easy for me to say this, easy for you to hear, but for you to do this, it's a lifelong journey. You really have to build yourself slowly and slowly. So many often that I say, you are in this field really for hermetic reason. You are not going to be rich by being a lecturer. You do it because you have a passion for knowledge creation. You want to build or create or have develop the new generation of scholars, new leaders who are going to lead the country and so on. So very often I tell this to myself, to others, to my students, hey, if you want to make money, you're in the wrong field. It's not going to make money. My son, I have one daughter and one son. Alhamdulillah, both went to Harvard. They did their first degree from Harvard University. When they got accepted, the acceptance rate was 6%. 40,000 students apply, only 6% accepted, 1,600 in each intake. So my son did very well, followed my path, did economics and computer science undergrad. Then did very well too, academically. Then, like in my dream, my son will become a professor like me, do a PhD and so on. Doing a PhD is easy for him, but I cannot make him to go for PhD. He said that why should I do a PhD? Whatever research you're doing, I'm doing more than that in my job. So he's a private equity investment banker. So finally, yes, makes a lot of money, that money that I will ever make in my life. He's only 25, makes about 2 or 3 times more than I do. So I cannot win the argument with him. But I'm hoping one day he will get tired of making money and so will come back to academia. So one argument that I gave him, yes, you do research, you do very high quality research, but only for a client. That research helps your client, private equity. But the research that I do, it helps everyone. So that is the argument I'm playing with him. So when you do this research, actually we are creating this public good, right? Everybody has access, benefit from it. And this is what one of the also main goal of, doing research, contributing, moving the profession forward. Now, do a small bit of research about proposed topic. Ask a dozen or so people about the topic and the likelihood of citation should a manuscript eventually publish. I always say this every day. If you're a thinking person, you come up with 10 different ideas. Let's say you're reading a paper that generates ideas automatically in your mind. But out of 10, maybe only one is executable, right? And how do you know it is executable? It's better to talk about your idea among your friends. That's what I need. You need a research cluster, a cohort, you can discuss. But that culture is not very, I find that not present in this, our subcontinent, because we think that if I talk to my idea, somebody is going to steal it. But stealing is not easy job in terms of research work, because maybe 10, 100 people are thinking about the same thing that you're doing. So it's a rat race who really gets to the finish line first. Because if your paper gets accepted and published before my paper, then you get the recognition. I don't. Of course, I get the reward of finishing something, satisfaction, right? There's a hadith, if you do istihad, if you reach the correct decision, you get 2 reward. And if you get the wrong decision, you get still 1 reward because you have tried. So you have to have this motive and the idea to motivate you. Look at various calls for manuscript from journals. This calls for paper state specifically what types of paper journals are interested in publishing. Call for papers, special issue for journal. Special issue has a bad name, but it is not. That was not the intention of a special issue. The special issue of a journal, the intention was to what? There's a new idea, and they're inviting people that do you have something to contribute to this new idea? For example, fintech. It's a new buzzword. There's a one SDG, new word. Now, whether any research has been done or can be done in this area. So before starting a research project, ask yourself the following questions. Is the proposed research new and interesting? Is it challenging? Is the work directly related to current hot topic? Will it provide solution to any difficult problem? So from a journal editor's perspective, it's not only that I have to like your paper, it has to be verified and vetted by the blind referring process. I also want to see whether that's going to generate citation for my journal and for my author. So it's not, if it is citation increases for my journal, it helps my journal, it moves up the rank. It helps you because you are a well-cited author. Will it provide solution to any difficult problems? This question in social science we ask less, but in natural sciences, the editors really look at whether it is a problem-specific research. And when most of the research done in natural science, like chemistry, physics, biology, are given to solve a specific problem, to generate or develop a new technique of solving something. But in social science, it is not that obvious, right? So our field is wide open. We look at different things. We deal with human nature, the behavior. So it is more difficult sometimes to quantify than doing a hard science research because you have to follow a certain methodology religiously. Yes, we do too, but not exactly the same way. You clearly must delineate the type of contribution being claimed in the article. Now, what are the author's goals? You publish articles to maintain position at a research-intensive institution. I do not know what is the tradition or method in Malaysian university. So if you are hired, of course, you go through the interview process. So you are selected, you have been hired as a lecturer, let's say a senior lecturer or an associate professor at AAGBS Graduate School of Business. Now, in the United States, you go through the same process, but you are under scrutiny for 6 years. So during 6 years, you look at how good teacher you are, how many papers you have published, whether you deal with your colleagues in an amicable way or you always fight, or you are, contributing to the service sector, there are different committees you're contributing. So at the end of 6 years, so you will be voted by your own faculty, up and down. So let's say there are 10 members in the committee. Now majority has to vote in favor of you. Then it goes to the chairman, and chairman says, I agree with the faculty recommendation. So these are all advisory. Then from the dean, it goes from the chair, it goes to the dean. From the dean, it goes to the academic vice president, then goes to the president. Then if you have a system, like in this country where Ministry of Higher Education, it goes and that the final, certification comes in, yes, this person has done enough, so this person's job has become permanent and has been promoted from assistant to associate. But I think in your country, once you are employed, you're employed for life, right? 3 years, the observation period. But does it happen that in 3 years after what is the attrition rate after 3 years? People are fired. Hey, you're not good. Rare, very rare. That's what I'm saying. But in the United States, it's really, we say this, it takes 5 years for you to do PhD. It takes another 5 years to get your job. To make your job permanent. But once you get your job permanent, we call this tenure, the common word. Once you're tenured, then your life is, your job is for life. Nobody can fire you unless you are involved in gross sexual harassment, this kind of thing. So and in the United States, your employment, lifetime employment means unless you choose to stop working, nobody can fire you. You can work until you go to the graveyard. But in Malaysia or Bangladesh, because of the population, so you have a certain retirement age, you must retire. You cannot work. But in the United States, you can do work as long as you want. So you publish paper to demonstrate productivity. You demonstrate competency in an area for professional development or for the job market. So I can say Arlena is known for research in certain area. So in the United States, you can pinpoint, even in Malaysia too, there are certain professors are known for certain skill set. So you want to be that person is a longer period of time. Nowadays I see among the young scholars, they want to become famous right away. It's not going to happen. You have to have really time frame, you have to be patient, perseverant, and so on. To graduate from MS or thesis or PhD program, that's another reason you do research, and many Malaysian universities, you have a publication requirement before you get your PhD. You receive reviewer feedback for the incomplete paper or ideas, and finally, not enough attention is given to citations. Now, you cannot live in an oblivion world, okay? You have to do research, like it or not, to get cited. And I'm sure many universities, they're looking at the citation record as part of the promotion or tenure requirement. Now, what is the goal of the journal editor? Of course, this is what you want as an author. My goal is to broaden the integrated reputation of editor journal through impactful articles. So there is a lot of hanky-panky happens, you tie up with conflict of interest. So I know Dr. Ahmed, hey, Dr. Ahmed, I need this paper, otherwise I don't get promotion, or we do this kind of thing. Don't misunderstand me, but this article has to have the quality. What it does is networking, instead of sitting this article for 6 months, it expedites the review process because you need this publication this year, otherwise your job or your promotion is at stake. Now, demand papers covering topics that fit focus of the journal. Look for progression of ideas, new development and research, interesting papers that contribute to the domain, and increase citation. So many times you may say, I face this problem. So you submit a paper, it survived the test rejection, so it was sent out for review. The review came out to be positive too, and at the end, when the editor has to, so buck stops with the editor. Editor can reject at any. So it may happen that, okay, that is fine, everything is done, but there are 5 different papers in the same line going through the process. So I have to choose 1 or 2. The 3 gets X, right? So I have to really ultimately do this arbiter, the knowledge, which gets in and which doesn't. So do you think that I'm a human being? Yeah, out of 5, it may happen, I didn't choose the best 5. I made a mistake, I choose the best one and the 4th one. So the other 3 got X. So this kind of error could happen, but this is not by intentional. You have to remember, editor is also an author, is also a human being. Look for progression of ideas, new developments, and increase citations for the journal. That is very important. One of these, when you are reappointment, like everything else, for the next phase, they look at what have you done, whether you have processed the paper on timely fashion, what happened to your site score or impact factor, and so on. Now, you as an author, when you submit a paper, you need to convince the editor. What you convince? You confirm the significance of the general area of interest and why your work will be cited by the journal's readers. You conducting timely and interesting research topics will increase the chances of a manuscript being accepted, potential for citation being a top factor. Now, how do you do this? The way you have to read a lot. You have to read articles to make it a habit. So let's say 10 different journals in a field you have published or you're interested in publishing. So pick up a journal. Nowadays, you don't really look at physical, so online you have an access. Read one article. Read the financial press regularly because that's where you also generate ideas, a lot on the current topics. Now analyze the aim and objectives of the journal and emphasize this factor. Convince the editor that you too thought about this journal and the linkages to a manuscript. So very often I find, students, the authors send or submit a paper to my journal and they have not cited a single paper from my journal. So you have to establish the connection. Why you choose this journal? Why? So you have to some way mold the editor. They say, look, I have written this paper and I think your journal is a good fit. So you have to give me all the indicators, right? And this, how do I know? So, when you fall in love with a girl or boy, you give them flowers. So something, this signal that you have to send. Significance of writing, good writing. Man, some of you are fortunate, those who had their first degree in English-speaking country, you pick up the language very easily. It becomes a natural thing. Writing is a gift, I always call this. I'm not talking about this, grammatically written English. I'm talking about more than that, to have the spirit of your writing. I have been writing for 30 plus years. I still, if I want to ask me how do you grade myself, a B. 8 types of writers are very few and far between. So it is early part of your career if you can develop the writing skill, because you may have a good gem, good stuff in your paper, but because you cannot convey these ideas in a very nice, clear way, your paper gets rejected. And another thing is happening nowadays, if your paper gets accepted, invariably 90% of the journal will tell you, have the paper copy edited for English, grammar, clarity, syntax, and so on. And that is very expensive too. Average, it will cost you like $500 to $600. 30, 35 pages long paper. But, some journals make a requirement. Unfortunately, you have to pay this in order to get it published, but I don't think that is right either. At one point with my own paper, I had a fight with the editor. I do not write that bad, first of all. I wrote it, and I had this, edited by internal, university. Each university have their own, the writer that help you. Then I also had a copy edited by someone. I paid. There is a market for it, right? So Arena cost me $1,000. So no, forget Arena. So I go to Nizam. The Nizam cost me 300. And these are all recognized in list of editors. So what I did, I went to Nizam to save money, not Arena. But the editor was insisting, go to Arena, go to Arena. I tell him, then I don't have money for Arena. So after this fighting and, 2 or 3 months, that finally he had to yield in. Because, hey, look, everyone has a different writing style, right? And Alia's writing style is not different. It's not the same as Nizam's. You know what I'm talking about. Even my colleague, there are a few colleagues, they write so wonderful. Even when I read their email, the way they structure their email, it's just beautiful to read. Now, the snapshot of the journal's article structure, title, is very important. The title creates the first impression and sets expectation what will be in the article and what should be the effective title. Now, identify the main issue of the manuscript, distinguish the subject of the manuscript, make accurate, unambiguous, specific, and avoid unnecessary details. Do not use uncommon abbreviations. So sometimes we have tendency to make the title catchy, right? But with this title, there is no connection what is inside. I'm sure you have seen and you review a paper, oh, it's beautiful, but when you get inside, there is no connection of the title and what is in the paper. So don't play this trick, it doesn't help really. Ultimately, it will get rejected. Now, when you talk about article structure, abstract, the second part after title. So the abstract serves as an advertisement for the article. So there are different types of abstract. One is called indicative descriptive abstract, whether or not to read entire manuscript by seeing topics. So descriptive, basically most of the abstracts are like this. You basically summarize the entire article in 100 or 150 words. The second type of abstract is called informative abstract, so-called IMRAD structure, or called introduction, method, results, and discussion. All those things has to be in your 150 word abstract. And the third one, which Emerald, the journal they edit, is called structured abstract. So structured abstract is what it will tell you exactly, what is the objective, methodology, finding, originality, value, society, etc., etc. So if you go to the website, most of the cases you have to submit the paper online. And before you do this, it gives you the guideline for the authors for the specific, how you structure your paper, how you format your paper, what minimum things has to be must be in the paper. Otherwise, they'll send you back the paper that you do all these things. So there is no easy shortcut way. You have to really keep working on these things. There's another tendency I find. Sometimes I get paper, it seems to me this guy has written the first draft and didn't even check to do edit it or have it, spread around or circulate around among the friends and get their comments and revise it. Please do that. Nowadays, it's not only that the editor catches it or the reviewer catches it, the machine learning, because once you submit a paper, it gets through the system. And the system catches a lot of inconsistency. It gets rejected. So be patient. Sometimes we have this art. We can, I'm going to America in 2 weeks. I need to finish this paper. If you cannot finish, don't force yourself. It doesn't really help you. So then it comes keyword. Very often they just send a paper without a keyword. So keyword is what? They are used for indexing. It have the editor select appropriate reviewers for the manuscript. So we really look at the keyword and use it to select. Words with a broad meaning should be avoided. Firmly and unambiguously established abbreviation should be used. So IMF, everybody knows. World Bank, everybody knows. This is the known, but if it's unknown, you really have to spell it out first before you. And I would avoid those abbreviation in abstract. You are trying to make it abstract anyway abbreviated. You have abbreviation within the abbreviation. That doesn't really look good. So introduction then and literature review. So in the introduction, answers a series of questions. And what are those questions? What is the problem? Are there existing solutions? Which solution is the best? What is the main limitation in existing theory? How are these limitations problematic? And what do you hope to achieve in this article? So you have to motivate and you have to show your contribution at the introduction. Easy for me to say, but it takes years of sitting down, banging your head against the wall. Sometimes, very productive, you wrote 3 pages, and sometimes days go by, you cannot read a few sentences. So it's a writer's block that you have, and we all go through all those things. Now, if you keep working, and this is like, the practicing this spirituality of writing, then you'll find you reach at one point that you feel bad if you do not write at least a paragraph a day. So when you achieve that stage, then you can feel that I am going in the right direction, that I have the reason, I'm becoming a scholar slowly. You will feel it. The spirituality you also feel, like, if I want to use an analogy. So introductory section must present complete framework, historical development, current knowledge state, and theoretical. Oh my God. Somebody has. I do just. Thank you. So, as I was speaking about the introduction and literature review, how does the introduction end? So let me go back to the previous slide. So the previous slide, so introductory section must present complete framework, historical development, current knowledge state, and theoretical orientation. The main objective for a good introduction should be you focus the reader on the research question or purpose, establish the proper frame of reference for the reader, identify the contribution to the field, and convince the reader about justification for undertaking the research. And finally, you write introduction last. This summarizes all things you have learned from your study. It's very strange. You're supposed to have intro, but actually you write the introduction at the end. So you always start in the middle of the paper first. Your data, your literature review, your analysis, then you go to the introduction, then you go to the conclusion. So it's not like you start with introduction, then you follow through. Now, an article's introduction and literature review, how does the introduction end? Provide a brief statement of the paper purposes and contributions, theoretical and managerial that paper makes in the literature, provide the reader with a roadmap of how the paper is going to flow. Do not provide surprises to the reviewers. Tell the reviewers what is going to happen and in what order. So, it gets, I always give this, in an arranged marriage, the boy goes to see the girl or the girl comes to see the boy, whatever way. You really make the first impression. So at least you go to the second stage. And same thing you do in writing introduction as well. Again, easy to say, it takes practice, 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 patience, patience, patience. So an article's introduction, literature review, one more time. The literature reviews survey critical points in current literature relevant to a particular topic. So what are the steps of a literature review? You select a topic, you search the literature, you develop the argument, you survey the literature, you critique the literature, and write the review. Some research has not been carried out before does not mean the justification for undertaking the research now. Okay, so this is the first study. I hear this word a lot. Believe me, this is not the first study. Many people have probably done that, you probably do not know. So what I'm trying to say, nowadays, in the 20 years ago, when I did my PhD, I did 30 plus years ago, or whatever time frame, I'm not the current of last 5-10 years. But one good thing happened, there's a bibliometric study. So let's say you have SDG, or let's say corporate social responsibility. You can Google search and can find 2 or 3 bibliometric studies that helps you to narrow down which articles for you to read. So life has become easier from that perspective. But in the past 30 plus years when I did, I really had to, and there was the Google, whether Google was not there, you had to really go to the, read one article, look at all the references, then you pick 4 or 5. If you're lucky, you pick the right one. So you have to go through all this trial and error process. But nowadays, it's a lot easier. You can find a bibliometric study in any topic you mention. I have written a number of them, and that helps you, tells you at least 10 good papers which are well cited. That tells you which direction you are going to go. Hypothesis development, another important part of your research. Avoid obvious hypothesis. What is the jargon? Okay, obvious. Mother is related with father. That is not an obvious. It's obvious, right? You don't have anything to prove there. Now, the proving part, oh, my father and mother always fights. That could be something, right? Because that's not normal. So you avoid obvious hypothesis. Make sure each hypothesis focuses on single testable item. Limit the number of hypotheses in the single. Sometimes I get paper 10 hypotheses. Man, 10 hypotheses. You try to limit maximum 3. And if you really have 10 hypotheses genuinely, you write 3 papers. You do not try to put everything into one paper. That becomes scattered. The size of the paper increases. By the way, you are also most of the time are constrained by the size of your paper, length of your paper, word limit. Like my journal, the IAD, you have a maximum 8,000 word limit. So it's like 30, 35 pages. So even though you want to tell a lot of stories, but you have to limit yourself what you want to say. So it's a focus 2 or 3 hypotheses you want to establish and you want to prove with the data that you have. Link hypothesis to theory. Sometimes you just collect data, you start running regression without knowing what the hell you're doing. And hypothesis you haven't developed. But the hypothesis should come from well-established theory. Or you are trying to expand the theory. Whatever way direction you take, but it has to be connected with some conceptual basis. Make sure to avoid null hypothesis and specify directional effects and clear pattern or expected results, because sometimes it can go in that direction. In two-tail, right? It can go yes, no. So you have to really look at something. Sometimes you know exactly to go one direction, but you have to have this conviction when you do this. And you try to check the type 2 error when writing hypothesis, the type 1 error and type 2 error, you have to be very careful on that part as well. Methodological consideration. Choosing suitable method from broad range of methodologies is challenging task. Question need to consider while selecting appropriate method. Very often now there are different types. It's a qualitative research or it's a quantitative research. It's a primary data collection. It's a secondary data that we're dealing with. But the question that you ask, why and how does the chosen method address the objectives in an appropriate manner? Is the methodology used in this research clear? Is the methodology appropriate for research question? What I face, from my experience as an editor, they said that, okay, this idea or this topic or this hypothesis has been tested already. But I use a new technique to test it. Now you ask us a question, how much you're adding by using a new technique? sometimes the technique regularization appeared. Like for example, RCT, randomized control trial, right? It's a new technique. But if you are dealing with panel data and corporate finance, you have identification androgeneity problem. You have the difference and difference technique. You have the propensity score metric. You try to use, but there's a purpose why you're using those type of techniques, right? And it has to be a meaningful one. Just because for the heck of, oh, I came to find out this new technique in the internet. I have paper. In the first paper I did OLS. Now in the second paper I'm doing this one. That's not going to work. And nowadays, that part has become very easy because computer econometric software is so user-friendly. You don't have to even tell because software will tell you what type of data, what it is doing. Even without knowing econometrics, you can write a paper. And you know, the alarming part is that there are new software or artificial intelligence. If you tell the software, let's say these are my 5 keywords, this program is going to write the entire paper for you. It's very strange. You know, the other day, my colleague said, hey, look, I have written a paper. It's a genuine paper. Do you know how I wrote this paper? Oh, this program. I gave 5 keywords and they generated paper. You can tell how to the length of the paper, whether it will be conceptual paper, it will be empirical paper. So nowadays, as an editor, it's a big headache. The other day, you know, somebody wrote, hey, look, you have published a paper, and I have seen a similar paper in another journal. First of all, it is not my responsibility what is published there, but it is the responsibility as an author, not slicing, right? To publish is a crime, you should not do that. But what I found out, sometimes you have to be very careful. It looks similar because the title are almost similar, but the paper actually different. So, you know, this is one of these things, you know, sometimes we ignore or probably because we come from developing country, we really do not know the standard writing written English. So you have to pay attention. You know, if you make a mistake, you pay a higher price later on. So rather, you better not make the mistake now. You know, make sure the similarity percentage is avoided by at all. When I say similarities, some of these things are ignorance that you do not know. Like how you cite a paper, how you write a literature review, that are because of ignorance. That's I can understand. Some are very purposefully, you cut and paste. You definitely should avoid this, right? Now, the software, you know, anti-plagiarism software does have to pick up where the similarities are. So sometimes it say that the paper report comes in 30% similarity. But when you look at it, you'll find they pick some word or name, those kind of things. So if you subtract that, it really takes care of 15%. So then your paper actually within the 10-15% limit. You're all right. So we do take a look at those things when the problem arises. But what happens nowadays, when you submit a paper, the paper automatically goes to this anti-plagiarism software. So it has a threshold given. So if let's say we have a tolerable limit of 30%. So if it goes to 35%, it gets automatically rejected. Even though that another 5% because of word, it's not really, you are stealing something else. So it's better to check all those things, okay? Now talking about analysis part, so it could be a quantitative analysis or it could be qualitative. If you do a quantitative analysis, you ask 2 questions. Is the analysis used in research clear? Is the analysis appropriate for the research question? Validity and reliability tests should be shown clearly, at least in the appendix. Reviewers want to see certain things that may not appear in the published version. You know, sometimes from my own experience, Journal of Corporate Finance is one of the good journals in finance area. So I have written a paper, of course, very rigorous, 2 reviewers, very wonderful, very thoughtful comments gave. Then we have to address it, revise the paper accordingly. Then we had to write a response letter. Our response letter was longer than the paper itself. But those things are not going to get into the paper. I have to convince the reviewer that, hey, look, I have done everything that you asked, and this is the way I looked at. So you have to convince. The reason I'm saying is, the editor don't have time to read each of this. Editor is absolute. He can read the paper, can accept it. But nowadays, because if I get 600 papers, I'm a human being, right? I can't really make a decision. So I rely solely on the reviewer's report. So you have to really convince the reviewer that you have done all the revision that you're asked to do. Now, if you disagree, I'll tell you how you politely address. Sometimes a reviewer could be, unreasonable. And the reviewer is wrong. You may find it. There are many cases. But do you get mad? Hey, look, man, you don't know anything about. No, you have to really diffuse it in a nice way. Come with the message so that he can understand or she can understand our mistake. Okay? And we are all human. A reviewer can make mistake too. And if it is a good person, good scholar, they will admit their mistake. And they are not making an objection on the basis of this. Now, if it is a qualitative one, which I see 90% of the research coming from our part of the world, I'm talking about developing country, because we do not have a secondary data, or access to the secondary data is very expensive. So very often we end up doing survey. I'm not against survey, because if the data doesn't exist, you do have to run survey. But let me tell you, the survey research has a lower acceptance rate in good journals, because somewhere that is not right, but that is the ruling paradigm. Okay, if you want to publish in A-level journal, survey-based article, you will not see, or rarely, unless you're a famous author, they cannot deny. Otherwise, I would not really go into that direction. But paradox is that Islamic finance is a new field. We don't have enough secondary data, right? Like if you want to do banking study, bank scope, the bank scope data has been beaten to death by everyone, right? So if you want to do, let's say, Islamic mutual fund, then that also has beaten to death. So you have to generate secondary data and test with time series in order to get a meaningful result. So I'm not saying survey is a bad thing, but if you do it right. Case study could be another way. That's also I like personally, because Islamic finance is also more appropriate. Let's say you're looking into a product, okay? And product design. There's a lot of controversy, tawarruk, not tawarruk, murabaha, whether this certain item really fulfilling the maqasid of Sharia. You can do a case study. And that tells a lot of good things and useful knowledge that you're creating for the industry, for other people to follow. So improve the quality of case study research by applying criteria of credibility, conformability, discuss the theory in setting of the case. Sophisticated qualitative methods provide rigorous training for systemic comparison and interpretation of case studies. Now, a snapshot of the article structure. Findings must be presented and described in a manner that the reader can fully understand. Captions of figures and tables should be clear to make self-explanatory, and tables should not to be crowded. So we said this has become a normal now. So a table must stand on its own. It's like an X-ray report. When you look at the table, you don't have to go to the main text of the paper to understand the table. Table will tell its own story. And develop this if you don't do this. I find this, the authors don't pay attention to this thing. For quantitative data, present your findings following the same sequence used in the development of research framework, similarly with a regression or other model. For qualitative data, findings derived from interviews, observations, and organizational documents. Consider figure and tables, use appropriate scale and axis. So this kind of things, you really have to make it nice. Now, there are different word processing software came out. There is new one, LaTeX. Have you heard of LaTeX? I heard this is very wonderful, but it takes a different skill set. You need to know the coding in order to, but I heard that produces the final message in a beautiful way. But I am the old generation, so I still, Excel, MS Word-based, I do write. And most of the journals accept that is still the prevalent method of your paper submission. Discussion. Describe how results relate to question or objectives outlined in the introduction section. You know, sometimes when it's a discussion, there's a difference between report and discussion. Report like, okay, this blood sample you have given, so these are the report, I found this and that. But the discussion goes beyond reporting. So very often we make this mistake not knowing the difference between what is discussion means and what is reporting means. You have to have both reporting and discussing simultaneously. What it means, how it is related to other studies, how it adds new thing to your paper. So describe how results relate to questions or objectives outlined in introduction section. Develop logical linkage from the data and findings to the conclusion. Provide interpretation for each of the results presented. Show and explain how the results are consistent and different with prior studies and why. Mention any limitations of the research and why, despite the limitation, the research is important and adds to our knowledge base. And describe logical extension of the research findings. Now conclusion. Article's conclusion is the last impression left with the reader. Do not just summarize, which you have already done in the abstract. You know, we have tendency, I do that too. It has to, well, you have to summarize, but you have to go beyond summarization. Present global and specific conclusion regarding objectives of the research. Indicate extensions and limitation of one's findings, and if so, suggest future research. Do not overstate the impact of research and avoid undermine one's research work, but uncertain words like probably or maybe. You know, you cannot just left hanging around. You have a hypothesis, yes or no, right? Not maybe. Maybe that means you have not really reached to a conclusion. It is a still idea in the generation phase. Implication, theoretical, managerial, societal must be present but not be extended beyond the ability of the data to justify. So very often I see, okay, you have a data, you have a hypothesis, you have a beautiful technique, you analyze, but you draw a conclusion which is not related to the data that you are analyzing. Don't try to overreact, you know. Yes, it may be implied, but it is not directly related. No implication. It has to be like hard science, connected, A identification causing B, not in between. Other consideration, choosing right journal is crucial. You can do it, getting help from your colleagues, references, keywords, journal finder. Sometimes, you know, if you have a friendly editor, you know me, so you send me a paper, can you look at this paper, does it fit with the journal? And if the editor is honest and says, no, it's not it, then editor can tell you it's not a right fit, but that other journal could be right fit. Sometimes you talk to your colleagues who has published and so I wrote written, can you suggest it? Sometimes life has become easier with artificial journal finder. That also tell you, give you a series of journals, then you go dig deeper into these things, actually see whether there is a right match for your paper and the journal itself. Is go to reach specialists, multidisciplinary and worldwide or local information and writing style adjusted accordingly. You really need to know your audience. If you are writing this for a practitioner, having a very complex mathematical model is not helpful, right? So you have to tone it down. You write the mathematics so that the practitioner can understand. But it is for academic or people, then you can tell all this because academics can understand. Strictly follow journal's guide for authors. Poorly prepared paper is sign of disrespect and likely to be just rejected. Very often, you submit a paper without knowing what are the journal style. Don't do that. It really annoys the editor a lot. And if you annoy the editor, even this good paper, this annoyance sticks to the editor. So, it makes your life more difficult. Presentation should be in a logical manner, best showcases materials and transmit the message directly, clearly so the reader arrives at conclusion. Avoid citing personal communication, unpublished observations, and local language. You know, sometimes it happens I get paper because I can understand the French. So they have translated this paper into English. So translation is not always one-to-one. So some of the, hanging fruit, lies around the French word. So it could happen in Malay too, Baha Malaysia. I see the translation done and something local language left over. You have to read very carefully. Even if you use translation method, sometimes I can understand, you always think in local language, then you use our translation, but look what the translation convey the message or not. Now, avoid excessive self-citation. Oh, Kabir Hassan did this and this and this and that. Don't do that. It's a Riya. It's also not Riya means from the religious sense, but in the paper itself. Some people have this egoism, right? They think that they is the only person. It doesn't help. Journal self-citation also, too many same journal, it's not taken positively. Spelling needs to be adhered to the standard English. Alternative must avoid, and terminology should be consistent. Now, abbreviation, unless established firmly, should be avoided. If used, should be defined on the first use in the abstract and the main text. You already know this. First time you really need to tell what it is. Consider the acknowledgement section to thank for help with technical expertise, finding organization, and in the final manuscript, reviewers and editors. Acknowledgement state one's affiliation to research project and grant number or reference. It has become very common. When you submit, it will go to different stages. At one stage, you tell, was there any grant attached with this? If it is, name the grant. You know what I do because the journal wants to make money out of it. So they know that if it is connected with the grant and the grant has money set aside for publication, and publication could be for open source. So you want to make your article available right here so that people read it and so on. So they collect all this information by asking all this question. So in 99% of my cases, my paper is not related to grant. So the answer is honest. But even if it is a grant, let's say I want to work with someone, I said no, otherwise, then the next question comes in, would you like to publish open access? So if you say yes, how much? $3,000. So what benefit do you get? $3,000. The paper will be available right away. If you don't 3,000, you have to wait 1 year. But anyway, nowadays, once the paper is accepted, it is given a citation, and people can go and if an urgency, I can download this paper, pay $30, then I can read it. So it depends on you which way you like. Some people wants to because they have the grant money and they want to spend the money, because if you don't spend it goes away. Then it's better to have your paper cited or published quickly so that everybody have access to it. But for science, not our social science, hard science, it has become a norm that the grant money has a specific money attached to it, and the journal submission fee is very high. So when you submit a paper, let's say chemistry, journal submission fee could be $3,000 to begin, and the grant is written in a way that process the money, the budget is already in the grant. But in social science, it is not there. In the social science, you have the other extreme, attendance and conference, right? You spend bulk of your money going to conferences. But the conference is not cheap. You have to pay for your ticket, stay in hotel, you have to pay submission fee, all sorts of things. But I heard in some countries in Malaysia too, they limit how much of a total grant money can be spent towards presenting the paper in conferences, whether it's a local conference or international conference. So the ideal manuscript would be what? It will be 25 to 40 pages long. It will have 100 to 100 words abstract, introduction up to 2 pages, literature hypothesis between 4 to 6 pages, data and methods about 2 to 5 pages, results and discussion between 10 and 15 pages, conclusion about 1 to 3 pages, number of reference between 10 to 30. Sometimes reference section is 5 pages long. Don't do that. I mean, if you have, so that means what are you doing new? You know, big journals like Journal of Finance, they will say maximum 8 to 10. That means they are looking for paper which are truly new. I mean, you're 50, even though I said 30 is too much. Usually, even my paper, I run around 10 to 15 references. You know, you have to avoid the references from lower level right journals. But sometimes that is the only reference you have, then you cannot avoid. I'm not saying that, but if you have the option, 100 references, choose the one with the highly cited journals. The number of figures and tables, each about 6 to 10 for each paper and so on. Now, from the perspective of the reviewer, so it goes to the reviewer. You have written the paper, following all the techniques I told you, you submitted it, then it goes to the all checking, filtering, and the filtering your paper survives. It survives the eyes of the editor. The editor sends it to his associate editor. It also survives his filtering because it's associate editor also does reject, then is sent to the reviewer. Now, what does the reviewer look at in a paper? Whether it makes a significant contribution to theory, whether it has a good likelihood of being cited, is it founded on sound theory, presents new or existing material in new light, presents its contents in a logical flow, presents its content with clarity, has interest as a case study, address properly managerial implication, includes an adequate review of previous literature. Now, empirical papers, criteria, reviewers additionally consider the following. Which method has been used? Are hypotheses properly developed? Is the sample size appropriate? Is the sample representative? Is the analysis appropriate? Is the analysis presented clearly? Does the analysis truly support the conclusion? You know, if is a true effective reviewer who has done research in this area, he or she can right away find out there is something wrong in the analysis. Look in the table. So, you know, don't try to fool. You know, sometimes you fudge the numbers. So you have, let's say, a table, you change the sign or you increase the p-value. Don't do that because sometimes it's not conceptually possible to have this result. And a effective or powerful or knowledgeable reviewer is going to catch it very easily. Now, reviewer report comes in, it comes to my desk or to associate editor desk. So these are the different things that do. Let's say you have 3 reviewers. Reviewer called reject, B reject, C reject, clearly reject, right? Second case, it could be reject, B reject, reviewer C called anything, reject. Third one, the total rewrite and resubmit, total rewrite and resubmit, and the first one reject, and the final conclusion is also reject. Now, you could have a reject, total rewrite, resubmit, manual rewrite, submit. So, even the one reject, the editor use the transcription, associate editor can give you either reject or if I believe that there is something there can be salvaged, that give a chance, total rewrite and resubmit. Now, usually, if it is one rejection and one major revision, I'm talking about when you use 2. If it is 2 major revision, I use my discretion. So most likely you hope to get 1 major and 1 minor revision, and then it goes to the back to you that you revise the manuscript, and that's the way we make our decision. Again, it is not again foolproof. Now let's say 2 reviewer came into minor. Then I look at this very low quality review report. It really doesn't reflect what is in the paper. I can reject it too. And it happens a lot. You know, there's a game being played, and of course you have to be very careful. Now, most of the journals, when you submit, it asks you to give referee, it's a mandatory to give 3 referees name. So you give 3 referees name, I may choose any of your option or not. Let's say I choose 1, and you tell the 3, hey man, I did 2. I have submitted this paper, I have given you name as a referee, and when it comes to you, because your buddy, oh, it's a great, blah, 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 should be accepted. you do this, and tendency we have there. So you're not being very honest, it really doesn't pay off. You get caught. Because if the other two reviewers that I have chosen said it's a piece of trash, then you lose your credibility. So I flag you. Next time, I don't invite you as a reviewer. So you really need to build up your reputation as well. So what to do when receive, revise, and resubmit a major revision letter? Proper mindset is really key for revising manuscripts successfully. Authors should be flexible in their attitude and willing to accept criticism positive way. Good advice to put the letter away until negative emotions. So if you get a rejection, go and have a party. Forget about this paper. Take your family somewhere for 3 days. Because you spent last 6 months to write this paper and they said that it's a piece of trash. You believe in your research and have this faith. So it got rejected from one journal doesn't mean that it doesn't have a place to be published. It is. It happened to me a lot on a regular basis. You know, sometimes it happened, I sent, usually start with the top journal, then it get rejected, then it goes to. So it happened many times. I sent to a journal, it rejected, but it got accepted in a higher level journal. But you have to deal with the emotion, and rejection is a part of life. You know, in the last few days, I was here, I got 2 acceptance, 1 rejection. So it is happening. It will happen every time. So if you want to be research productive, you need to have a number of 10% in pipeline. Don't just wait 3 papers. Oh, you've written the best paper. Nobody has written this. Don't. This is a negative mindset, okay? Nobody is that great that you have written. You're not a Nobel laureate. And we are not in the Nobel laureate league, including myself, okay? And the type of research that we do Islamic finance, nobody likes this. There are not many journals either, right? So we have to support each other. So we have to develop this, this environment I talk about, helping each other. Keep in mind, it is a revise and a submit letter, not a response to reviewer comments. Some comments may sound harsh, but others always should try to understand where the comments come from. Was not written very clearly, hard to understand. Remember to revise whole manuscript, improve flow, revise tables and figures, not just the parts of the reviewers point out. Should block out enough time for revision, as good revision is a demanding task, and authors should try to carry out the revision earlier rather than later, right away as possible. Now, standard revise and resubmit letter. So you have to, once you do this, you revise it, then you have to write a response letter. You have to be very polite, gentle, like you are talking to your lovely wife, okay? You attach your own. And literally you have to do this. So in the whole letter, author should strike the right tone, polite and grateful, confident and robust. First paragraph should thank the editor and reviewers for opportunity to improve the paper and valuable feedback. Second paragraph should summarize the overall improvement, including large-scale changes to the structure, purpose, breadth of development, demonstrating significant effort that you have put to improve. Reviewers also authors, I may write, but we are human. So let's say they ask you to do 100 things. You have been able to do 80. The others you're unable to do. And the reviewer will understand. And it all depends how you address the letter. Next paragraph should show clearly how authors have responded to specific suggestions and comments and review. Sections of the response letter to each reviewer. As I told you, my referee response was longer than the journal article itself. Use different color fonts or use normal 4-page italics to distinguish reviewer suggestions and the switches. If the reviewer is in, let's say, one color, you say your response is in another color. So they can pinpoint, reviewer can understand, but it makes the easiest. So editor's life easy. The editor knows what are the reviewer comments and what is your response. Start each reply with like, done or thank you, this has been corrected, and be sure to mention the page number where you have done this. Closing paragraph is another opportunity to explain the manuscript's overall improvement. Consider other factors in revision stage. Editor expects authors to address all issues raised, but not necessarily to agree with all the comments and suggestions, because academic research should encourage debate and exchange of information. So if you try to conform everything you tell, so I lose my identity, right? I don't want to lose my identity because I want to expand the knowledge, add something. And editor do understand that part. Be very careful about considering rebuttal. It is far more likely to result in rejection. Don't rebut it. Oh man, you don't know what you're talking about. Don't do this. I made this mistake in early part of my career too because I was so thrilled about my research, but the reviewer doesn't like it. Outright rejection of the reviewer comment. The authors believe that a comment is based on a misunderstanding. It is best politely to suggest the text's lack of clarity and apologize instead of putting the blame on the reviewer. The reviewer is wrong. You put the blame on me. Oh, maybe it was my sort of clear. I apologize for this. Then right away the other party knows that he made the mistake, not you. So these are some of the politeness practice that you do. Provide simple explanation of the text that all readers will be able to understand and avoid too technical words of jargons. Not all comments are equally important from reviewer's view. Find out which comments are really key and address those very convincingly. It may need to collect additional data, rerun all analysis, rewrite all the theory. This is where the young, we try to, fight back. I have done my research, it took me 6 months. I collected so many data that if the reviewer asks you to reanalyze, you should do that. Expand the data set, you do this. Again, you have to do the math yourself too. If it is a high-level journal, and you look at your cost and benefit. Okay, how long will it take, how much energy, and what is the benefit that I get? If it is a low-level journal, let's say, okay, they don't, I'll send it to another journal, but try to address as many comments as you can, because more likely it will go to the same referee again. It happened with me too. They said that, hey, I have read this paper, and here's another jack sheet in this, review, send it to another journal. And don't do that, because then this guy in his mind, and the reviewer, permanent, register in his mind, and next time, because we understand the pattern. Sometimes nowadays nothing is anonymous. So I know the writing style of Kabir Hassan. So one of the paper I get, I can read, I can find out, I can conclude with reasonable certainty that is also written by Kabir Hassan. Everybody has their own writing style. You cannot really hide it. Not all comments or editors ultimately are interested in publishing the best possible articles. This author should ask for additional time to do best revisions if needed. Now consider suggestion to avoid best rejection. Journal scope does not include the concerned work. So it is a journal of sustainability, and you're sending a paper of market efficiency. So you have to read the objective, mission, and vision of the journal. Just don't send to any randomly to your paper to any journal. Insufficient problem statement, data insufficiency, clarity of images and optimized techniques, use of obsolete methods, writing inability, and data is biased. Now, some advice for early career researchers. Publication in elite journals are necessary for peer esteem. So you may have 20 papers in low-level journal. Nobody really knows about this. But if you have 5 papers in top journals, people know you establish a career. And you have to have this high goal. Evidence of originality, quality, and recognize high achievement, but does not necessarily mean scientific contribution is significant. High-performing journals in emerging subdiscipline areas are not always recognized adequately. Resistance to change journal ranking leads due to vested interest to retain status quo, like in the US, ABS ranking, in the Australia, you have ABDC. So that's the reason I keep telling everywhere I go, you create your national standard. And with that standard, you compare yourself, your contribution, your reward for promotion and pay raises. Now we are relying too much on the external validation, Web of Science, Scopus, ABDC, ABS. Why can't we have our own ranking, national ranking, where all the academics sit down and do, and these are being used by every university? Minister of Education can take this responsibility. Do you know how ABDC has been created? Because that was a mandate by the Australian government, because they want to use a uniform ranking so that they can allocate the federal funds to the different universities. You can do the same thing here in Malaysia. Right? You do have? Okay, very good. The Indonesia has, I know, Pakistan has it, and you should rely more on this thing rather than external validation. But unfortunately, I was told that it's still the same thing. Scopus, Q1, Q2, that is becoming some sort of, mesmerizes you or captivates you. And this is also makes good business for the publishing houses. Their rate of return is very high, Elsevier. Have you noticed? You have spent so much of your time, energy. You could not give your time, to your husband, to your wife, children. 2 years you have written this paper and you submitted, you paid the submission fee very high. Then paper got to the review process, then you use another copy to pay. By the time you do, just requirements or dollar amount, you spend $10,000. And then you give the copyrights to the publisher. So they are using your talent to make business out of you. And if you want to read your own paper, then you have to pay another fee, $35 to download it. So this type of business model is killing. It's an exploitation. And we are subjecting ourselves to this exploitation because we want to have this ranking, citations, and so on. So we really need to get out of this thing. And this is another way of colonizing the scientific research dissemination, I believe. Right before I came, so General Court for Finance, I submit paper. Its initial submission fee is $300. Then, if you are lucky, you get a revision submit. In revision, you have to pay $270. Every time you do this, so usually they run it through 3 times minimum. So they extract about $1,000 from you in the process. But you are willing to pay $1,000. This is a high-ranked journal, right? So we are making us a slave to this process. We really need to get out of this thing. Now, nature of scientific contribution is not clearly articulated. Must consider discovery subsequent justification to assess scientific contribution. A portfolio indicators is needed. Different matrices address different aspects of a journal's performance. By the way, it's not only citation that what they're also looking at all metric. What is the impact of a paper on the society? So they are looking at a different dimension of citation, and it's social science is probably more needed, right? Why do you research? To help people. In solid science or the natural sciences, we do research. It doesn't have any impact immediate. For example, Einstein relativity theory. How is it going to help to create? But you are spending millions, billions of dollars, to prove the super collider that goes run around. You do it for the sake of doing something without any immediate implication for the industry. But social science research are dealing with humans, environment. There has to be some sort of impact of a research in the real sense. Some advice, so sustaining leadership and focusing innovation. Sustaining leadership and focusing on innovation are critical. Need to consider how research stream should evolve to address emerging issues. Find and follow advice on how to succeed. In a maturing discipline, guidance is available on what to do early in one's academic career in later stages. So, if you attend the academic conference, they have early researcher breakfast. So you should attend those kind of things. You really need out this pinpoint that becomes part of it for the rest of your life. Understand your capabilities. You are capable of publishing in B-level journal. You should know you try to address A-star. Please don't misunderstand me. We always improve, but you have to do slowly and slowly moving up. Understand your capabilities, focus on the overall research portfolio. Not every article will end up in a top-tier journal. Rather, focusing on rejection, think instead of developing a portfolio of articles which can offset rejection. Leverage co-creation within partnership. Develop network of trustworthy research colleagues, as I said all along, with whom to cooperate and collaborate. Focus on the big picture. No one can predict future research opportunities or success. Researcher can control influencing factors to identify and take advantage of opportunities that arise. Have fun and enjoy a desirable work-life balance. You know, very often, most of the top-notch researchers, they're crazy. They don't have life, actually. You know, either they're divorced, do hanky-panky thing, take drugs. I'm saying multiple things they do. They're not normal. But since we are follower a great religion, Islam, it's a balance, the middle of the path. So you have to have a work-life balance. You have to spend time with your husband, with your wife, with your children, have fun, write research. Because yes, you're trying to help. And this is also ibadah, you take it that way. But you also remember the day after. Because if you ignore, just because you're writing an extra paper, your wife or your children or your husband, you have to be accountable for your action to God. God is not ask you why you did that. Okay, that's all I want to tell you. And if you have any question, I can take this question and can answer.
Thank you very much for the screen. Share. How to get strategy and decide how to proceed from your experience.
Okay, you know, sister, let me tell you. I'm doing it too much. During COVID, starting 2019 started, right? Yeah, 2021. So I get a lot of requests from all over the world because you know they look at my citation. So and sometimes it is probably helpful to have my name associated with the paper. At least it doesn't get dust rejection. But that makes my life miserable. I spend more time helping other people, you know, okay, send the papers, I look at, I read, I edit, I change, or tell them to revise, then have my name in it, and send it. So the process, but you know, I can do so much. And part of the reason I understand why I'm overwhelmed, because I do Islamic finance, and not many Islamic finance scholars have the citation, only few. And not everyone would be interested in helping other brothers and sisters, right? So when you do this, there are two ways you can go. And the way that I would advise you, the institution, or let's say in the graduate program, you have few friends used to study together, think, dream together. So you have this chemistry that is developing, right? Then you build this cohort, you try to write papers among yourselves. So one of these things that I have done, my best buddy, you know, from the same program. So we write, let's say I write a paper, give it to you, you edit this and that, then you become part of my paper. You write a paper, I do the same thing, and become part of your paper. Then we get a two publication. It's a joint production. So that a process which is halal, I would say, to continue because you're helping each other, you're not stealing somebody or giving free ride. That was strategic thing you should do. Second thing, you want to go outside, you find trusted person that you respect, and if you can hook somebody in onto your network, let's say XYZ, very famous in this area, and you are reading his stuff and you want to do something like this, then you write a paper then you send to him and see whether he gets interested in it. If he does, then you're starting a new chapter of your career. So that is the second way. But the most important, I would say, that is happening right now, and it is really not advisable, free riding. You avoid this because that diminishes you as a scholar. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you say, yeah, you have a lot of water, a lot of newspaper, but you cannot really feel inside that you really do not deserve it. It's like, you go, you're thirsty, you go to an ocean, got a lot of water, but you cannot drink it. Don't get into this situation. You may have tongues, and many people are playing this game, and I advise them don't do that. They want to have 3-star, 4-star paper. They think that by having this, they will get a better job. They don't, because we understand the game, right? You cannot game the system, so don't do that. Most important thing, develop your skill set. First thing I would say, because you come from non-speaking country, try to learn how to write effective English. Second thing, if you're an empiricist, try to learn how to collect data, manage data, and run it econometrically. If you have these two skills, nobody can stop you. You will be focused.
Questions. Let's have this. I thought exactly, but that was in 2009, long time ago. And I think now the one is very tough. The published again as stated is very just to get your quick comments. For your journal, share the popular rejection rate so far.
The rejection rate is now 90%. But that includes desk rejection too.
Okay. Right. And what were your opinion on some journals, for example, they ask the correction. And after the writer has done all the correction, at the end of the day, does the term be rejected or not being granted publication? It's comparable.
Okay, it happens to me a lot too.
Yeah.
Like recently I had the third revision, it was rejected. It's very uncommon, but it got rejected. So now you can fight back. So you can do appeal. There's a process called appeal, but appeal seldom comes with a good result. Not actually, most cases it comes with a bad result because editor remembers you, this guy is a problematic author. So next time when you submit a paper, it just rejects it. So the best advice I would give, it gets rejected after revision, which is very common. Just take it as a grain of salt, put it aside, then come back, and then submit to another job. Because I believe if you do research, genuinely, your research will always have a room, which will always have publication place that your paper will be published. May not be the journal that you deserve, but so what? If it is as long as it's an intake journal, you are all right.
From the online audience. The research here for paper time, which is review paper versus research paper. What is the estimated percentage of success for a review paper to be published?
Okay. These last 3 years, I have written about 10 plus bibliometric study, and I have decided not to write it anymore. Part of the reason that it has become a game. There is a technique software that you can use bibliometry, and the software itself, if the paper is 70% of the paper is written by software. All the data is being generated. You don't have to understand. If you're a good writer, you can put it. But the 30% where you go deeper and try to see what is the current trend of the literature within this specific set and move forward. Many journals have, when you submit, you say, what type of paper is this? A research paper, review paper? The review paper, the journal editors do because it includes citation, but very limited. So you do not bank on your research potential or research life entirely based on writing review papers. Of course, if you do a research PhD just finished in a certain area, you're the most knowledgeable person. You can have a good research report review paper and try to get it published. You'll find an outcome. But don't bank on making your career by writing review papers. Done? Oh, okay. I see. Okay, let me. So you are a faculty member here? Oh, postgraduate, you doing a PhD or master? Okay. Thank you.
So Alhamdulillah, thank you, Prof, for the session today. So I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Dr. Muhammad Kabir Hassan once more for sharing his thought with us today. So on behalf of AAGBS, I would like to thank everyone, especially our respective lecturers, for joining us today. So thank you and have a good day. Assalamualaikum.
Tomorrow I have one. Oh.
Yeah.
What class is that? Or the name of the class paper? Oh, yes, we can. Yeah, yeah. Okay, that will be great. I think you know before. Oh, that is the right here. Oh, that's the last time.
It's what I yeah. Sorry.
But the next time you Okay, so one is your process.
One, two.
rejection. So you are a government student? What organism? Out of rejection.
Let me go. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay.
You might know. So, what is the problem? So he has his own number, all right? Then you have shared yeah. Yeah, I always what's your name? So, I have my email address. Yeah, share and send your proposal. So, for comments, I can. Good luck. So, what is your doing summing finance? Finance. What is it called? Financial stress.
They don't want to disclose the report. Some of the so it is not just only for the financial issues. So I as the question.
Your distributed money is so the proposal means you have to pay the so how much you have to set up to have?
And still what's fine.
Fraction. So finding a discussion very to actual data analysis. So have you figured out? So each stage you have to go to the next stage because you get to by your supervisor. Yes, 7 already. Oh, finally. Okay. Let me see. So Wahida left already.
For 2 weeks.
You know, you attentively came to see me. Yeah. For days. Yeah, so I might do something with you guys. So let's keep it there.
So thank you very much for your time.
Sure, go ahead. Sure.
So, so you percentage at the place
No,
or your time.
no, wait, just no, wait, I need to really. I. Let me see. Close it.
I think this is coming.